Yep. All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Socialist Resurgence web classes. This is our first webinar in a series of online classes we'll be hosting to help spread solidarity and education in this time of crisis. This evening's webinar is called Why Socialism? When we were motivated to do this class in order to help frame what we mean when we demand a socialist present and future. With the threat of COVID-19, capitalism's failures are further exposed. The stark incompatibility of private profits with public good is apparent. The ruling class has simply used Band-Aid reforms to address this crisis, offering little to no relief for workers, even as the workers are the ones who produce the wealth. Questions have arisen louder and sharper than ever. Can there be respite from the suffering and destruction of capitalism? Is a better world possible? And what could this world look like? Socialist Resurgence's Dan Belle will be giving tonight's class to help us dive deeper into the meaning of socialism. More importantly, Dan will help us to understand what socialism in the concrete present could look like and why we must fight for it. Dan is a teacher, activist, and former campaign manager for Fred Link for Senate 2018 and Chris Hutchinson for Congress 2010. He is also on the Socialist Resurgence National Committee. I'll be moderating, so if folks have questions for the presenter, you can put them in the chat or use the hand-raising tool or post in comments on Facebook. We'll have a questions and answer section following Dan's initial presentation, and I'll now turn it over to Dan.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. This is a very interesting time to do this kind of talk, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm thankful that you're joining us. The moment that we're in very much reminds me of a quote that comes out of an account of a revolution, an account by a participant in that revolution. Would like to guess it's the Russian Revolution. The quote comes from Leon Trotsky, where he says, "The swift change of mass views and moods in an epoch of revolution derive not from the flexibility and mobility of man's mind, but just the opposite, from its deep conservatism. The chronic lag of ideas and relations behind new objective conditions, right up to the moment when the latter crash over people in the form of a catastrophe, is what creates in a period of revolution that leaping movement of ideas and passions, which seems to the police mind a mere result of activities of demagogues." So why do I think of this right now? I think of this because the moment that we're in now is bringing to the fore all kinds of contradictions, all kinds of absurdities that are inside the moment, the long moment that we've been living in. The objective conditions have changed, but we have not adapted to those new conditions. We have not changed ourselves. We have not changed our society to meet those conditions. And in moments like this, where there is an enormous crisis like the kind created by the coronavirus, that creates that is what forces these objective conditions to crash over people in the form of a catastrophe. And all of a sudden, there is a leaping of new ideas and actions. So for instance, we have workers who are being required to go to work, make cars and make bombs at a time when that means the endangerment of their families and friends, and when everyone else is being told they can't go to work to do extremely important things because of this virus. We are in a situation where bosses are locking themselves in their offices or going home while ordering asthmatic workers to continue their shifts at hotels, while prisoners are being kept in jail, even though this will mean not just an incredibly lethal outbreak for those prisoners, but for everyone else in the society. The governor of Connecticut, the liberal Ned Lamont, cannot find one person that he thinks should be released right now. Sorry, I've got a face issue. I'm looking at a sheet. The governor cannot find one person he thinks is worthy of release in this moment. He thinks every single person who is in prison deserves to risk death. And that even though it will also mean the deaths of people who are working as guards in that prison, and the deaths of people outside that prison as well. We are seeing the governor of New York, another Democrat, fighting to cut Medicaid in the middle of a pandemic. We are watching the president pretending that a miracle will end the pandemic. We're watching many people's bosses listening to this man. In this moment, millions of people are discovering that there is nobody who is going to help them, that the people who are in charge of their lives are capable of incredible irresponsibility and incredible irrationality. The crisis itself, the irrationality that it is revealing, is even deeper than this, and we are going to be uncovering it for years afterwards. For instance, it has recently come to light that the federal government has been attempting to buy new ventilators for years now, knowing that a new pandemic was coming after seeing close calls with viruses like SARS. They got one company to offer to make ventilators at a cheaper price. And what happened? That company was bought up by a competitor who bought them up to prevent these new cheap ventilators from being produced. The federal government just sort of says, "Aw, shucks," goes to another company, just finally gets the contract signed. Now that we're in the middle of a crisis, GM is offering to make ventilators, but it's asking 2 or 3 times as much as any of these earlier contracts. And the president says, "Ah, shucks, I'm not sure we can buy ventilators now." Meanwhile, there are doctors and nurses everywhere and millions of medical workers going around without the basic plastic coverings needed to deal with this epidemic. So this is not a revolutionary situation that we are in, but it is a situation where it gives us a glimpse of what a revolutionary situation is like, where not only are the contradictions of the society revealed, but where people realize that if I don't step in to save society, nobody else will. Where they start seeing that not only is the old order wretched and decayed and irrational and vicious, but they see that they themselves are actually present an alternative. A few examples of this, if I may. Just some stuff from the meme world. The number of billionaires pushing for everyone to go back to work early proves one thing and one thing only: they don't make their money, you do. Here is a joke on supply and demand and its ability to deliver goods, specifically healthcare. And finally, this one I love the most. You can stop the trolley at any time, but doing so would disrupt the trolley service, causing the company to lose profits. I think here we see what Marxists think of when they talk about how workers can create the new society. It's not some obsession with workers as being more moral or idealistic than other people or than bosses. It is basic facts like this, things that seem totally normal and reasonable to working people are completely irrational and bizarre to capitalists, and becoming more so. And we're going to talk more about why that is today. As the insanity of the old social order sharpens, the ruling class and its managers, in turn, tend to lose their grip on reality because they cannot justify their existence, their purpose, their interests through anything but the most overtly irrational systems of thought. Donald Trump is, unfortunately, just the beginning. And in place of this, working people begin to step to the fore. The impulse towards socialism, not just today, but in general, appears all around us in the form of seemingly irresolvable contradictions and paradoxes. the world simultaneously becomes more interconnected and more prepared for war. Those who create all the wealth are the poorest. Those who give society its power are crushed by it. The gambler is rich, the toiler is poor. We are surveyed by innumerable agencies and video cameras while we are lied to at every turn, and the most important information is locked away by the most sacred of social norms. Advances in technology destroy life rather than improving it. And instead of working less, we end up working harder. Where there are jobs, it is too expensive to live. Where it is cheap enough to live, there are no jobs. The choices multiply towards infinity, but each succession of outcomes is only worse than the last. Unemployed workers stand beside idle implements of production, which in turn stand beside the poor who lack their products. The homeless sleep outside enough housing to provide for them many times. Alongside the hungry sits food rotting in trash bins under lock and key. And the greatest fleet of vehicles the world has ever seen crawls through traffic twice daily, filling and then emptying vast seas of concrete and asphalt that displace the very destinations drivers intend to reach. We slave away, producing ever greater quantities of goods and become ever poorer and more desperate. The base of human habitat is daily destroyed before the eyes of the world, and only greater wealth and human flesh are committed to its ruin. No wonder Marx called communism a specter. It haunts us wherever we go. It creeps into fantasies and fears alike. The new society can be seen emerging from the contradictions of our world, but this is not the ghost of Christmas past. This ghost speaks of our future. The current crisis highlights some of these old contradictions in new and different and bizarre ways.